Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Tech Bytes review. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Elecom Huge. Now what makes this particular trackball so interesting is that it takes a lot of design inspiration from the Microsoft Trackball Explorer. You can see we have the left mouse click down here on the thumb. It's a finger operated trackball, so there's a lot to like about it. There's also a few negatives that we'll get into when we get into the usability and the build quality side of things, but overall we should be in for a pretty interesting review. I know this one is heavily reviewed on various forums and whatnot, so we should have plenty to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump on into the build quality section of this review. Now, moving into build quality, one of the first things you'll notice when you unbox the Elecom Huge for the first time is just how large the ball really is. It's actually quite surprising. It doesn't look as big as it is. You can see with my hand just resting on the mouse, I can easily fit 3 fingers on this trackball. So it's definitely not small. It's not even a medium-sized ball. They call it an oversized ball. Measures 52 millimeters, and it really does help with a lot of that fine-grained control. So from strictly just a ball standpoint alone, it does have some nice heft to it. It looks nice. It feels nice. I think Elecom absolutely nailed it on the ball. Now, speaking of the ball, let's go ahead and do just a quick size comparison to the Kensington Expert. So as you can see, the Kensington Expert, for those that are familiar, is definitely a fingertip operated trackball. It's one of the larger ones that you can buy comparable with like a CST or an X-Keys L-Track. And you can see ball size is pretty similar. So this is definitely an oversized ball. Don't let the marketing or the packaging fool you. This definitely is larger. This is not the size of a thumb operated trackball. So you are getting a pretty significant ball when you buy the Elecom Huge. So looking at the case itself, the upper housing is more of this squishy texture, similar to what the MX Ergo would have, but almost a little spongier. This one in particular actually doesn't cause too much hand sweat, which I find rather nice. My hands do get pretty sweaty after an extended period of time, and I haven't had any issues with this particular mouse. So again, that's just on this upper housing where your hand is actually going to be resting. The lower portion of the housing is just some cheap glossy plastic. Nothing really to write home about, but at the same time, it doesn't suck. It's, standard quality plastic that you would get for any large retailer or manufacturer. So not really going to knock them there. Button wise, it does use kind of that same cheap plastic, but it's more of a solid matte black finish. So it doesn't have a shine to it, or at least not nearly as much as what the lower housing would be. I do believe all the buttons that, or all the switches that the buttons lay on top of in this particular Elecom Huge model are the cheap Chinese Omron switches. So again, you can probably expect about 1 to 2 years of lifespan out of this particular mouse. Not a deal breaker. I think the mouse runs for about $69 or so, and it's easy enough to open back up if you do want to get in there and replace the switches yourself. Moving on to the scroll wheel, it is a little bit flimsy. It's not my favorite scroll wheel. It doesn't have super defined notches for when you're scrolling, so you can actually over scroll pretty easily with it. I think it would feel 10 times better if they just added a more prominent notch as you're scrolling, because it does just feel like you're spinning kind of a free spinning wheel when you're in there, and it kind of takes away from the overall good quality feel of the rest of the device. The scroll wheel is probably one of my least favorite parts about this particular mouse. It just doesn't feel that great. That being said, it does have middle mouse button click, and it does have a left and right tilt, which is very handy if you're doing a lot of Excel work or something along those lines. So again, it may not be the best feeling scroll wheel, but it's hard to knock the entire device on such a small, relatively insignificant component of the overall mouse. So moving on to some of the other switches and selectors that we have here, as you can see, we have a function 1, 2, and 3 button that are added in addition to your standard left click, right click, and then forward and backward mouse buttons. So this thing has buttons galore. You do need to use the Elecom software to map it if you're a Windows user. I do believe that Linux users have the ability to map this without needing to install the mouse assistant, which is Elecom's proprietary software. So that being said, regardless of how you map the buttons, it's fantastic that the mouse has the buttons. We'll get into some of the quirks of the software a little bit later in the review, but for now, talking about build quality alone, The layout, the design, the button placement, it really is just about perfect. Taking a look at the bottom of the unit, you'll see that this is powered by two AA batteries, which in my book is a major plus. It's reminiscent of like a Logitech M570. You don't have to worry about rechargeable batteries. I've had these in here for a year, haven't had to replace them. So great there. We have a place to store the 2.4 gigahertz dongle. We have a giant oversized finger hole to pop the ball out of, which is fantastic. None of that crap like they did with the MX Ergo where you have to stick a pencil in there. This is a bit of an odd one where they do have a low and high selector for powering it on. I believe this is the polling rate for the mouse, the frequency in which it checks for movements and whatnot. So I keep it on low. I don't think I've ever had a need to go for high. But that really sums up kind of what this has to offer on the back. The only thing that I forgot to mention is the DPI selector, which is also down here by the thumb portion. Again, nothing to write home about, pretty standard. It's a selector, it does its job. Now moving into the usability test, this is where unfortunately I ran into a couple issues. Primarily the first one being the slope of the upper housing itself. Now, where this becomes so problematic is if you have medium to large size hands, despite what the name of the device may seem to imply, it's really not meant for medium to large size hands. And let me demonstrate. So if I were to place my fingertips here on the device in the way that's intended, where you can use the fingertips to control the ball, and I place my wrist on the integrated wrist rest, let's take a look at this whole unsupported region in between. See where the slope is right up here? Unfortunately, the way this device is designed is if you wanted to actually have your hand supported, you need to push it forward, but then look where your fingertips are. They're completely overhanging the front of the device. It's absolutely unusable when you're using it this way. So despite it having huge in its name, it's really unfortunately created and designed for much smaller hands that can rest their hand and have their fingertips touch here and still be supported in the palm region. If you do have larger sized hands, mine are 7.5 inches. Unfortunately, you are going to be using the Elecom Huge in this way with a largely unsupported region of your hand, and it does get tiring after a period of time. So unfortunately, for that reason alone, I could not use this as a daily driver. It sucks, you know, it is what it is. I think everything else about this is really fantastic. So if you do have smaller hands, definitely look into it, but don't let the name fool you. This is not a trackball that's meant for larger hands. Moving on to another really, really unfortunate design decision by Elecom on this particular trackball that impacts the usability. It's something you won't notice by just inspecting it right out of the box, but if we were to pop out the ball, you could see that I have white zirconium bearings in here. Now, that is not stock, and the answer is yes, you are correct, that is not stock. I swapped these out. I had to swap these out. Unfortunately, all of the Elecoms these days ship with what they call ruby synthetic bearings, and they are absolute crap. They are the scratchiest, stickiest bearings you could possibly imagine. If you want to do any kind of pixel perfect or fine-tuned movement with the ball, it's next to impossible. It really is unfortunate that they continue to use those ruby synthetic bearings, but if you do the swap on the Huge, it's night and day. The ball rolls buttery smooth. It's like using a Logitech Trackman marble, actually. It's that smooth. It really is fantastic operation. But again, if you're looking at this from a purely stock perspective, two big issues, the bearings and something that you can't fix, which is the slope and the overall design of the upper housing. Unfortunately makes day-to-day use rather unpleasant for this particular device. Now, I did want to take some time to discuss the software because it is a bit of an issue with the Elecom device, particularly with the Huge, where you have these 3 additional function buttons. Maybe I was doing something wrong, but during my testing on a Windows computer, in order to access these additional function keys, I did have to have the proprietary Elecom Mouse Assistant software running, which is a huge negative for me. I hate running software to manage mouse and just any peripheral for that matter. I'm a huge fan of onboard memory and being able to flash your configuration to the device itself. That is not here. So if you do want to make use of these additional buttons, let's say you want to map your abilities to it for Diablo 2 or for WoW or anything like that, you are going to have to run this software in the background. It is my understanding that if you're using Linux, you can remount this thing fine, you have access to the buttons, it's not really an issue. To wrap up this review, would I recommend this trackball to your average user? My answer is maybe, and I hate giving a maybe, but in this particular case, I think it's warranted because if you have smaller hands, this is a really, really good trackball. It's a really unique layout, reminiscent of the MTE, and there's really not much else like it on the market for this price range, which is around $69 to $70. So with that being said, you really can't go wrong. Now, if you do have larger hands and you think that having this unsupported region is going to be an issue for you, I would say maybe keep looking. This probably isn't the right trackball for you. The ball and the keys and everything are fantastic. Once you do that bearing swap, it's buttery smooth. But only buy this trackball if you're willing to put in the work and willing to actually go in and swap those bearings. If you want to buy something that just works out of the box, this probably isn't the mouse for you. And to be quite honest, this probably isn't the brand for you. Elecom as a whole has a bit of a quality issue, especially when it comes to their bearings, and it does require some manual intervention. And that concludes today's review, everyone. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked what you saw, please make sure that you subscribe and let me know what you like down in the comments down below. If there's anything that you guys want to see or anything that you'd like me to review, please also leave that in the comments. I did recently start a new blog site. It's called Byte Authority. I'll begin to start linking my product reviews and things, the textual form of that, into the videos as well. So please feel free to check that out. I do have affiliate links as well, so if you do want to support the channel, please be sure to click on that link if you plan on buying one of these. Helps me out a ton, helps me to continue producing content for you guys. So thanks again for watching.